Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. My name is Keith Downey, host of Morning Joy, and we're going to be talking about asceticism, how to build a strong discipline of self in order to get stronger in virtue. And to talk about all of that is Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blai. Good morning, Debbie and Adam.
Well said, Keith. Thank you so much, and welcome to The Next Right Thing. I am Debbie Georgianni with Adam Blai, and we like to tackle different things that can help us move along that spiritual path, and asceticism is one of them, this self-discipline, this self-sacrifice, and we're gonna get into it and how we can apply it to our lives, this mindset, this lifestyle, if you will, in order to get stronger. And as you said, Keith, to build and build virtue and to really get closer to God. So, Adam, why don't you start?
Sure, Deb. So, asceticism is something most of us only think about at Lent, and we think of, okay, I'm going to give something up for Lent, and it might be, like chocolate or sugar or some food that you really like, and you'll give it up for Lent. And we all have kind of a vague idea that somehow that's good or pleasing or good to get some, self-control, or maybe God finds that pleasing. So let's look at where this came from and where the word asceticism, which means self-sacrifice, how it developed in the church. So first of all, we need to understand at the beginning that the physical life, the physical body, physical pleasures, they're not evil unto themselves. That is an old heresy that was done away with long, long time ago. Basically, asceticism, or self-sacrifice or self-denial of something, guards against us valuing the creation over the creator, against seeing life as only being the physical, that's all there is. So where did this come from in the church? Well, of course, at the time of Jesus, the idea of fasting was common, and in fact, that's a common idea in every world religion. The idea of fasting is used. The idea of self-denial in some way was part of the culture, and so people kind of just accepted that as part of life, as part of your religious life. But then after Christ died and was resurrected and the church started, for the first 300 years, there was tremendous persecution in the Roman Empire. There was martyrdom, there was suffering. If you were Christian, you were putting your body literally on the line, your life on the line, just by being Christian. And, I mean, it was a brutal time. And so when we talk about, the Roman martyrs, we're referring to these, centuries, 300 years. And so people had a sense of the spiritual was more important than the body, because you were risking your body and your life to pursue the spiritual reality of Jesus Christ in Christianity. So that was kind of baked into being a Christian for 300 years as the religion formed, as it started the very process of getting organized and thinking through what all these things that Jesus said and did mean. Then in 313, Emperor Constantine, the Roman emperor, whose mother Helena was Christian, converted and declared that Christianity was an acceptable religion in the Roman Empire, and all the persecution stopped in the year 313. All of a sudden, the body was safe. We no longer had fear of martyrdom. You weren't afraid of being, denigrated in society and, cast aside and treated like a second-class or third-class citizen. Suddenly it was acceptable to be Christian, and all those fears went away. Now, what happened was the pendulum, which had swung very far towards the spiritual matters and the physical really is not as important, the pendulum swung the other way, as it does with us humans. And many people became lax in their faith, and they drifted into paganism and indulgences and the sins of the culture, because they were free to live in the culture and enjoy all the aspects of the culture that they were living in. So in reaction to that, that's where you hear the term desert fathers and desert mothers. In reaction to this and this indulgence and this kind of taking on the culture and kind of really almost getting lost in it, some people fled the culture completely and retreated to the desert in imitation of Christ in the 40 days that he fasted in the desert at the beginning, right before his public ministry. Immediately after the baptism in the Jordan, The Holy Spirit drove him into the desert. He fasted for 40 days, was tempted by Satan, and then started his ministry. And so these early Christians said, well, I'm going to imitate Christ. I'm going to go into the desert and retreat from the world. Now, pretty quickly, the church realized we have a lot of people living in town and in the cities and in the culture, and we have these few people that are living out in the wilderness, and things are a little bit out of balance, and there's no real rules for this, and we don't know how to do it well. And so what they did is they said, we want to bring some structure to this for those that are retreating from the world. And that's where religious orders came from. Religious orders were often founded by people that were retreating from the world, like Saint Benedict, who founded the Benedictines. He was living in a cave for years, and people approached him and sought him out for his holiness, and he developed a rule of life, and that's where the Benedictine religious order came from, and the same for a lot of the orders. So this is where we get religious orders. It was a balance between the individual just fleeing the world and the person who's living in the world and getting lost in it. And the religious order was kind of a controlled way of self-denial and lots of prayer to live a very, very Christian life. Any thoughts so far, Deb, before?
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I like the way you described it for us. So most of us we don't belong to religious orders, and most of us don't live in caves, and most of us aren't out in the desert, and we're living in the world and trying to get on with our lives. How can we bring this to a practical level for us, Adam?
Well, in our modern situation, we can take advantage of asceticism in little ways, little self-sacrifices, and it's used basically to build self-discipline. But here's a list of some of the things that it does for us. When we apply asceticism, a little bit of self-denial, to the things that lead us to sin. Let's say I've got a problem with drinking and I tend to sin when I drink. That's super common, right? Well, what about giving up drinking? Choosing for 30 days to give up drinking. Now, of course, if you're an alcoholic, you may need some treatment to go along with that, but that's an example of a vice that you could give up to get under control because it leads to sin. The internet leads to sin for many people. Gambling leads to sin for many people. There's many things that we could bring under control. That's one way we can use asceticism to combat habitual sin. Deny ourselves the things that lead to sin.
And Adam, are we talking extreme denial of those things, or are we talking like slow in incremental ways?
Well, what we have found, and psychology has looked at this too, what we have found is incremental, starting small, is more effective, and then building up your ability to control something over time. So start with a brief period of time, or denying yourself part of it. Get used to that, and then take it to the next step. You know, we all know about the New Year's resolution, right? I'm going to completely radically change my life on day one, and everything's going to be great, and I'm going to be exercising.
After 4 days.
Yeah. And 4 days later, it all crashes. That's because we try to bite off too much. So if we're going to apply this, especially we don't have the structure of a religious order or spiritual director, we want to do it in kind of baby steps is the best way to say it.
Okay. Well, and would you suggest, though, that when we are practicing this to kind of buddy up with somebody for that accountability and for that help? Because, I mean, this is kind of a hard practice and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, you know, maybe you could work with your priest and let them know what you're thinking of doing, get some feedback from them, maybe some guidance from them. If you have a friend who has overcome what you're trying to get under control, maybe ask them to be your buddy in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great idea. Because with that added support and accountability, that helps along the way, because then you won't stumble, you won't fall. And then, because a lot of times when people try to go into this with the mindset that that's their intention, and they do stumble, it's like, oh, it's never going to work for me.
Right. And that comes back to baby steps and taking things a little bit at a time, having somebody to give you outside perspective, having that buddy to say, oh, I think you might be biting off too much there, or, you know, clearly you're not dealing with this well. Maybe we could do a little bit less of the self-sacrifice until you're used to it. or encouraging you, hey, persevere, you're doing great even though you don't think you are. I see you're doing great. I see changes in you. Whatever it might be, that can be really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. So the next thing it does, asceticism helps build the virtue of temperance. What's temperance? That's balancing the desires for the physical with the desires for the spiritual. So again, we can get lost in just pursuing our physical impulses and desires for comfort, for wealth, for gluttony, for sexual sins, whatever it might be. And we can get lost in just pursuing the physical, pursuing pleasures, and completely drift away from spiritual goods, the goods that last, the goods that we build up in heaven that help get us to heaven, the goods that we can offer for others for their spiritual benefit. So temperance is that balancing of the physical and the spiritual.
So it's interesting. St. Jerome and other great saints have said that the practice of asceticism leads to true perfection. And so that's really very interesting. And it's funny because we're in a world that tells us to do the exact opposite of that. So we really have to set out a plan to practice this in a balanced way so that it does spiritually benefit us. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And part of the idea is, Deb, we all grow old eventually unless God takes us sooner. We're all going to face the reality that nothing here lasts and we can't take anything with us. And nothing here will truly fulfill us. We may have that illusion for a little while, but we're going to encounter that reality. And so pursuing God by pursuing the spiritual goods now is a very wise thing to do, and that's why the church has always encouraged it.
Right, absolutely. You got me thinking about this practice of asceticism and how it has, it's evolved, if you will, into what we do during Lent with fasting and abstinence. So, we're already in that mindset. We're already practicing it, or we should be as Catholic Christians. So are you saying that we take it up a notch outside of those different seasons of the church year, or what exactly are you saying for us today?
I think it is good to practice some little form of asceticism all through the year, and maybe pick a goal for each year or maybe each season of your life and say, I want to make some progress spiritually. I want to maybe get away from this. Maybe there's an indulgent food that's not good for your body that you eat a lot of, and you want to take better care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, which is your body. You could think of it that way. Mm-hmm. Another way asceticism is used, kind of self-discipline is used, it is itself an act of love and charity. When we offer up some small sacrifice to God, some little discomfort that we choose to go through, and we offer it up for the spiritual benefit of our neighbor, our loved ones, or the poor souls, it's a form of penance. It's a form of offering something up that can bring some grace to other people. So really, asceticism can become a charitable act, a loving act.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it true that asceticism practice regularly can also help to keep away any demonic kind of influences and things that are coming at us? I've understood it when I've read various lives of the saints when they would practice this strong self-discipline, self-sacrifice. It was also a way to keep the demons at bay.
Yeah, it has been seen as part of spiritual warfare for sure. In our current state, in our culture and with the internet, people think of spiritual warfare as only the big dramatic prayers. They think of exorcism and they think of, dramatic words and, fiery priests and kind of radical things like that. And like unusual obscure prayers and curses and all this kind of exciting stuff. But really, spiritual warfare largely is the interior warfare that we do against our own nature to be selfish and indulgent, and against temptation. And asceticism is seen as part of spiritual warfare, part of the warfare that we wage against temptation and selfishness. You know, by working on asceticism, we increase our spiritual strength by learning we're more than the physical. We're more than just our impulses and desires. We get spiritually stronger when we discover that our will is stronger than we thought. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we can choose when we're going to eat, or, you know, if we're fasting, we can choose what we're going to consume. We can choose not to indulge in something that leads to sin. Mm-hmm. And when we see, oh, wow, I succeeded. I haven't touched, you know, that bad stuff on the internet for 4 weeks now. I really can do it. I get stronger. And that helps us in our spiritual warfare against our own kind of trials and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Right. So would you say that, how about for folks like to start, you know, I know during Lent, we, you know, don't eat meat on Fridays and things like that. What about not eating meat on every single Friday, you know, practicing certain things and just keep it going all year long, you know, not just during Lent or during Advent, but really just take it through the entire year and then expand it as you get stronger and stronger. Would you say that's a good way to start? Because then you're taking it seriously during especially Lent and Advent.
I think so. That's something I've, you know, taken up a few years ago now and have been doing, you know, for a few years, is not eating any meat on Fridays at all, just throughout the year. And I'll tell you what's neat about it, Deb, is, you know, we go through the rhythm of our week, but when it comes to Friday and the spiritual life, the religious life is now part of the day-to-day, it becomes part of the meals. It's kind of like a reminder, like tapping yourself on the shoulder, like, hey, life is about God. All of life is religious. All of life is spiritual. And I find it's a very powerful reminder to kind of reset my thinking and remember that just everyday stuff is also spiritual.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So let's give some other ideas for our Morning Joy listeners. So we've got not eating any meat on Fridays. We've got, you know, just little self-denial of things throughout the course of our day. We'd have to take a kind of an inventory of what's going on in our own lives and what we are struggling with, right, Adam? And then try to just slowly pull back from it and make a plan. You know, it's not just by impulse, you know, oh, I'm going to try to do this today, Lord, because a lot of times that fails. You know, if we're in prayer and we say, okay, I'm telling you, Lord, I'm not going to have that you know, extra drink at dinner or that extra piece of dessert, and then it fails because there isn't a plan in place, because that's so important for that general practice to get stronger and stronger. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and you know, we can learn a lot from psychology on this. So when you want to set, number one, you need to set goals. So, and the goal has to be definable, it has to be attainable, and it has to be short term. If you set a goal of, I'm not going to drink for the next 10 years, not a drop of alcohol for the next 10 years, that's huge, it's long term. It's, if you're used to regularly drinking a little alcohol, it's too big of a leap. You want to make it doable. You know, I'm only going to have a glass of wine with dinner 3 days a week, or once a week, or maybe one glass of wine each night, and I'm going to cut everything else out, and I'm going to do that for 2 weeks and see how it goes. But I'm going to commit. That's my goal. 2 weeks, absolutely. I'm not going to slip. And now it's doable, and it's attainable, and it's defined. And we can take what we've learned from psychology and apply it here. And this also goes back to have a buddy, as you said in our first segment. That's a really powerful thing. Chat with your priest for 5 minutes about it. Get some advice from somebody outside of yourself. That can really, really help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is good stuff, and I think it gives us food for thought, and to really look at our own lives and what we're doing, and so that we can get stronger and, you know, attain that true perfection like St. Jerome talks about. I think this is powerful. So maybe we could get some comments in the chat about that, because I know the chats are going strong on the socials, so that's wonderful. But Adam, asceticism, big word. You broke it down for us, and so that's wonderful, and so we can start applying it to our daily lives so we can get stronger. Thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day, Adam. And God willing, I will see you tomorrow for the next right thing. And that'll do it for today.
So much, Debbie and Adam. And I'm curious to know as well, how do you apply asceticism to your life today? What does that look like? Share it with everybody, especially if you are in any of the live chats, whether you're on X, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We want to know, and we might inspire somebody else to pick up that particular type of self-denial. If you're not listening or streaming live, maybe you're on the radio or you're listening on via podcasting, you can also email us at morningjoy@grnonline.com. And hey, don't forget to catch the Spirit World this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. Of course, per usual, they're always going to talk about some incredible, interesting topics about the Catholic faith, from angels, demons, and everything between. And of course, it's done in a Catholic perspective, so you know it's going to be legit. Now, if you didn't catch last Saturday's episode, they talked about the cross of Christ is basically our banner leading us to spiritual victory. It's the means that Jesus used to defeat the powers of death and sin. And they even talked about relics of the true cross and how effective they are against demons and solemn exorcisms. So make sure to check that out. Just search The Spirit World on YouTube, or if maybe you're wanting to just listen, maybe you're busy like majority of people are and you don't have time to sit down and actually watch the full hour. I highly recommend just searching on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or basically anywhere you consume podcasting. But coming up next, 5 captivating facts about the human soul as articulated by St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa. We're talking about that with Dave Palmer coming up next on our Thinking Out Loud segment here on Morning Joy, where truth matters. We'll see you right after this break.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.